Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Pathfinder Amber. All right, so what is Pathfinder Amber? Pathfinder Amber is an opportunity that exists. Currently, I'm the only one who's really proposing this, but I think this is an incredibly unique opportunity for Paizo, and I think Paizo should do it because no one else in the industry can do what I'm about to talk about, and the opportunity that Pathfinder Amber has is so unique and so rich and would help so many parties that it's really, by far, in my humble opinion, the best go-forward option for Paizo. All right, so let's break this down. All right, so it's 2008, and Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition comes out. Everybody hates it. A year later, Paizo says, hey, absolutely everybody hates Pathfinder, hates Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. Let's create a game called Pathfinder, which will function as Dungeons & Dragons 3.75. And they do it. They make this clone of Dungeons & Dragons that is, it's literally based on the OGL, the 3rd edition open gaming license, and it's a clone of Dungeons & Dragons. But it does do some things in a really unique way. It has amazing art, it has amazing production, and it just crushes it. And Pathfinder becomes Dungeons & Dragons' main competitor, and Pathfinder is Dungeons & Dragons' main competitor today. Right? Nothing else in the world is as strong a competitor to Dungeons & Dragons as Pathfinder 1E is today. Okay, so basically that comes out. I think Pathfinder 1E comes out in 2009. About in 2019, okay, Pathfinder 2E busts onto the scene. And it comes out after 10 years. So Pathfinder 1E is a decade old, okay, at this point. And so at that point, you get this situation where Pathfinder... So you have Pathfinder 1E, and then you have a situation where Pathfinder 2E then comes on the scene, right? And Pathfinder 2E took 2 years to... First of all, they built it in secret for 2 years because they knew Paizo built in secret for 2 years because they knew it would infuriate people when they announced a new version. Now, why would Pathfinder 1E fans be upset about a new version? Well, no tabletop roleplay game in the world, right, would have would logically have fans who would be more upset at a new version being announced. And the reason why is Pathfinder is not a normal tabletop roleplay game. It literally burst forth from it's a parasite that burst forth from the dead corpse of 4E, right? The dying body, which had fetid morbid parts, right? 4E was bad. 4E was bad as far as it truly sundered the community, right? So no other game in the world has a more curmudgeonly, I'm not going to the next version. That's literally its core audience. Is people are like, I'm not going to 4th edition. I'm staying with Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition, even if I have to go to a new company to get new content for it, right? They are curmudgeonly and incredibly dedicated to no new versions, right? And Pathfinder's community is unique in that there's no other game that was born out of the death of another game at the scale that Pathfinder is at, right? And also, let's talk about the scale of Pathfinder. We know the numbers, right? So in 2020, Wizards of the Coast made $800 million, okay? And over 800 million. I think it was like 875, right? And Paizo, as its number one competitor, made 25 million. So that means that that Wizards of the Coast made 32 times as much as Paizo, right? So that means that Dungeons & Dragons' greatest competitor is 32 factors behind it in just gross revenue, right? That is really bad, right? And it needs to get fixed. And Pathfinder Amber is a true opportunity to fix it. So what is Pathfinder Amber and how do we get there and why should we get there? Okay, so Pathfinder Amber is an addition of Pathfinder that can exist if Paizo announces it and allows it and commits to it. Okay, so what would happen to get to Pathfinder Amber? So Pathfinder Amber would be a promise from Paizo to say, listen, we know you hate new editions, and we know you hate second edition, right? Now, the reason I'm saying this is I have never met in my entire life a single person who plays Pathfinder second edition. Not one. I've never met a game master. I've never met a player. I've never seen it played in the wild ever, right? It's not a thing, right? Now, on the internet, you will absolutely find dedicated 2E groups. And I think like every state's got like one or two groups, right? And the groups who play it are very loud and very like, oh, it's good. But the reality is, I know at least 50 Pathfinder players, and not a one of them, every single one that I talked to said, we are not touching that thing. We play Pathfinder 1E, and we do not care for 2E, right? And it totally makes sense, because this is a crew that was from the gate most dedicated to never seeing a new edition. Okay, they're not a normal tabletop role-playing game community in that way. In the birth of the game makes it self-selecting for people who detest new editions, right? So Paizo has this opportunity to come forward and say, all right, here you go. We are going to kill Pathfinder 2E. We will not print another book for it, okay? It is now an archived edition. We are now going back to making new books for Pathfinder 1E, and we're just gonna continue printing the old book. Maybe we'll give you some nice new covers for it, right? But the content will remain the same, and we're gonna create a heck of a lot, right? A really robust amount, right? A really robust amount of new content for Pathfinder 1E. And we're going to and there's going to be new source books, there's going to be new adventures, new adventure paths, everything for Pathfinder 1E, right? But we're going to call it Pathfinder Amber. And when we call it Pathfinder Amber, we promise you, it's now 2021, we Paizo promise you, we will never make a new edition until 2030 at least. And we will give you in 2029, we will give you our decision on whether we're going to let Pathfinder Amber go to 2040, right? So basically, Paizo has the opportunity, because of their scale, because they're the largest competitor to Dungeons & Dragons, they have the option to do this. If they made this decision, it would get covered by the international news. This would be picked up all over the world as a news story. Any other TTRPG, any other indie, nobody else is big enough to get this kind of story done, right? Maybe Warhammer could do it, and it would matter. But even there, nobody really plays Warhammer at scale. Certainly not anywhere near the people who play Pathfinder, right? So if they were to make this promise, then what they would do is they would say, hey, are you tired of wondering when your books will be worthless, when your books will no longer be useful, when your books will be announced by the company of, hey, you dumped all this money in, and now all that money is, you can just, it's all confetti, right? Because all the books that you're going to have to rebuy everything, right? Are you tired of that carousel? Well, we got a solution for you, right? We're promising you 9 more years on a game that's already had 10 years, right? And this Pathfinder Amber, if you hate edition spin, we can solve the problem for you. And you only have to solve the problem, you only have to deal with the problem once a decade, right? This will give Paizo time to grow, right? And when I say they need time to grow, they need time to grow, right? This is a real problem. Just so you're aware, in 1997, Microsoft invested $150 million in Apple because Microsoft was so far ahead of Apple. They gave lots of reasons, but in my humble opinion, one of the reasons they did that was they were so far ahead of Apple that the government was looking at them like they were a monopoly, right? Now the government ain't going to roll over on D&D because it's a monopoly, but it's a bad look when you're defeating your closest competitor by a factor of 32 to 1, right? So the reality is, Paizo needs something dramatic. They need something important, right? They need something to push forward. Professor Dungeon Master over on Dungeon Craft did a whole did an entire show saying that he thought Paizo might be in a lot of trouble and might be on the block to be sold, right? And that it might be a good idea for D&D to buy them lock, stock, and barrel, right? I think that's a terrible idea. They have nothing unique, right? Like D&D would just have crappier content. Like why on earth would Wizards of the Coast ever buy anything from Pathfinder? Like you don't buy your copy. Like that's silly, right? So I definitely just, but I do think Paizo has real issues, right? I think they're doing fine. I think the company's going to go forward, but the there's no. I personally don't think there's. I think Paizo is very healthy from a company perspective as far as surviving, right? But when you're 32 times behind the main flagship in your industry, you need to do something dramatic to move forward. So I truly believe that Pathfinder 2e needs to die. And I understand there's a very dedicated group of people who play it. It has a loud and vigorous community, but I am very convinced it has a massively small community, right? Like, just go look at like what the top Pathfinder 2e channels get compared to what the top D&D channels get. It's minuscule, right? And even that, like, yeah. So I really think Paizo has this incredible opportunity to do what no other game to do with Pathfinder what no other game in the industry can do. And by the way, of course, any other game in the industry would be like, we're on version 3, edition 3, and we're not going to do another edition for 10 years. No one would care, right? Because it'd be so small. You're like, so you're gonna like you're sacrificing 10 grand. Who cares? Like, move on, right? But this is real. Like the numbers on Paizo are real, and the industry doesn't have this because of the history, the makeup of the community, and the failure of Pathfinder 2e to really capture capture an audience that's larger than Pathfinder 1e. And I challenge you. Give me one fact that points to Pathfinder 2e being played more than Pathfinder 1e. I don't think there's a fact in the world that would point to that truth. Now, we also have a big problem where one of the biggest problems we have is it's incredibly hard to get data in the tabletop roleplaying game industry, and it's only going to get harder, right? Because nobody's incented to give any numbers openly, right? I get that, right? So basically, Pathfinder Amber is a huge opportunity for Paizo, and it would actually help Dungeons and Dragons 5th Edition too, if it had an actual competitor. When your competitor is 32 times behind on your revenue, you don't really have a competitor, right? It's ridiculous, right? So this is needed for Dungeons and Dragons 5th Edition. This is needed for Paizo. This is needed for all those people who were faithful to Pathfinder 1e. This is needed for the industry. Pathfinder 1e Pathfinder Amber, right? And the death of Pathfinder 2e makes a lot of sense and would really, really give the industry a real shot in the arm, a real competitor for Dungeons & Dragons, which is desperately, desperately needed. All that is my opinion. I would love to hear your opinion. Do you agree Pathfinder E needs to be slaughtered on the altar of progress? Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.